Droog neepij, droog neep, Hello and welcome to Optional Rule. My name is Scott. I'm the host of this weekly D&D discussion show to talk about all things Dungeons and Dragons. Today I'm going to be talking about how to create interesting terrain for your game as I prepare for my Rime and the Frost Maiden campaign. And I'm also going to talk about creating enchanted locations in your game. We've had that in my campaign as well. So let's talk about design and how things are coming together for our game. First of all, welcome to this stream. If you're new here, especially, go ahead and drop a hello down in the chat. I am doing a giveaway today. I announced it over on Twitter, so I'll leave you to follow over there to see what you have to do. But I have some Steam keys that I'm giving away for some great games. I think it's Paper Dungeons is the game today. I'll do that occasionally on streams going forward. So I hope you'll tune in for that, but mostly for the D&D chat here today. So thank you for joining me. I hope you'll follow me on Twitter, on Twitch here, on YouTube, all the social media stuff. And I really hope you'll share this show with people you think might find it interesting. And more to the fact, I hope you will participate. Go ahead and drop a hello down in the chat or talk about anything that you find interesting as part of this stream today. I'm going to talk about a few things, but I'm going to start a little bit with what was happening on the blog last week. I posted some things that people might find interesting. First, I posted a breakdown of 5e save, damage, and conditions that are by spell type in 5th edition. I got a hold of some data I could begin to parse, mostly for funsies. I haven't had a tremendous amount of time to write, so I wrote some scripts instead. Started parsing some data. You can find some spells that were broken down by the class, the save type for the count, as well as the damage type by spell, by class, and the conditions inflicted. I have to confess this was more interesting. Hey, how you doing, Kyle? I have to confess this was more interesting. I'll give you basically a heads up when we get to spoilers territory, by the way, Kyle. This is but we're not there yet. I'm covering the blog. I thought this was a little bit more interesting than I expected it to be, honest. Honestly, I saw some gaps in here for spells that surprised me a little bit. But then when I thought about them, I guess were less surprising than I thought. There's obviously an intentional design in the spell damage breakdown that the designers meant to include, and it tells a story about what I probably should have. Hold on, I'll cancel that load. I also posted, by the way, to sort of match this. I posted a post on my blog about monster resistances and totals in 5th edition as well. So you can sort of pair those things. But really talking about spell saves and types here, obviously dexterity is really king of the saves when it comes to spells. But you can see that there are gaps. There are sort of intentional gaps in the class spell save type, as well as the damage type and conditions. Like if you look at Artificer, that's what jumps out. One of the things that jumps out at me. So there are a ton of damage types available to the spells, which damage types available to the Artificer class. But you get down here, and there are very few comparative conditions. That's mostly owes to the Artificer's origin as a combat support engineer from the early days of Eberron, from 3rd edition when there was a magical items economy. And there are, same thing with the Ranger. The Ranger, to be honest, surprised me a bit. I expected more like restrained, prone. I expected more in the way of conditions, paralyzed and things like that, blinded. I'm surprised there's no blinded condition on the part of the Ranger. That seems like a really opportune area. Some of this came out of discussions I had with players online about whether there was any impact to letting players design their own spells. I'm a big fan of designing your own spells. I think players should be enabled to do that. But when you're weighing them as a DM, you want to just find out why they're trying to do it. Like, are they trying to design a spell because there's a great theme to it? Or they're really just trying to plug a gap in the save repertoire or damage repertoire? I think you want to approach that a little bit more slowly, because there is an intentional design here. If you look over in the monster saves, there are tons of a number of monsters are resistant to fire, let's say, or cold, but not resistant to force. And so, if a wizard tried to throw a spell at me, or anybody tried to throw a spell at me that was an intelligence save and force damage, I'd probably be likely to say, what's going on here? And that's your prerogative as a game master. So anyway, I hope you find that interesting, and I hope you find it useful. I'm not sure yet what I'm going to post next week, but I will post something I hope to be interesting. All right. So let's talk about D&D and sort of design. Now, I have to admit, this is going to be a spoiler. So anybody who's in my campaign, sorry to have to ask you to leave now. This will be relevant for the upcoming campaign. Actually, if before you leave, I'll start with enchanted locations first. How about that? So let's start with that, and I'll switch to terrain a little bit later. So this is not spoilers. This is actually something for design-wise for the players that you've already seen. So you can stick around for this if you're in my campaign. I'll give you a spoiler alert before you move on to something else. Now, I'm designing what's called an enchanted location. So let's start with that. And the players would have already seen this, but my goal here as a GM is to provide something a little bit more meaningful for the players when they like something more lore intensive when they engage with a location that gives them some magic options. The players have just hit 5th level, so they are opening the possibility of having a stronghold, a location. So but I don't want to just give them a building. I want to give them something they can choose. I want to give them something they can manage. They can have some agency, make some choices as players, and throw things out there. So I landed in this idea of something I will write a blog post about in the future for how to create generic enchanted locations. Like what is in the system to give you options to enhance locations. In this case, they found a Viking longhouse. I'll show you the picture of it. This giant-sized Viking longhouse. Then I gave them let me look over in the session here. I think it's in the session notes. This is 20, right? Yeah. So this is a place called Cold Ire Gorge. That is it had been dedicated to Auriel, the goddess in Rime of the Frost Maiden. And I wanted them to have a little bit more agency to sort of undedicate it to her and dedicate it to somebody they wanted to dedicate to. So that was a role-playing challenge last session to give the party like what gods do they follow, because we haven't really delved into that into the game, but the players really haven't had a reason to do that. So so I wanted to give them something to debate gods for, because why would they do it? So they have this location. If they choose to use it as a base, if they cast a ceremony spell and use the consecrate option, I think it is, I would make it permanent and give them some sort of permanent ability. So they chose Odin, which if you're here, I was curious to me as a game master, because nobody has rolled out Odin before. A couple of players worship as tagged a different god as the one they worship, but then they pulled Odin out of thin air. Not quite thin air, because there is a passage to Isgard, the temple, the plane in the cosmology of the Forgotten Realms that's very similar to Asgard and has a couple of other things there as well. So they didn't quite pull it out of the air, but it's a god associated with that. But it's not a god that the players had associated with them before. So it was an interesting role-playing challenge as a DM. And I was holding out to them this possibility that they can get some sort of ability or power or something, some bonus related to this location, and I'll let them debate it. And I threw out what it would be. It basically gives them, what I'm saying here is it is an enchanted location that its dedication to a god through the ceremony spell creates a lasting effect to allow ceremony to be cast once per day on anyone who worships there. So this is now, I gave it the property consecrated to Odin. Those who pray to Odin may receive one of the benefits of the ceremony spell once per day with no material cost. So it's tied to the location. So it creates this, I'll get to this in a second. I'll get to you in a second, wilderness locations. Let me go to the ceremony spell. Ceremony. Here we go. So it's a pretty low level spell. It's a first level spell. It has some material components. Now I'm waiving that in the area because people have to travel several miles to get here. It's sort of a holy location, but they can either you have atonement cast on them, which is that you can have your alignment brought back to its original. So basically people can come here, atone for their sins. You can create holy water once per day for free. That's actually a pretty good ability. Coming of age, you can add D4, add to the number 2 ability checks. That lasts for 24 hours, or dedication, which is you can touch one humanoid who wishes to dedicate to the god service for the next 24 hours. Whenever the target makes a saving throw, they can add a D4 to the number of the save. So they can just do that once, and that's it. So since it's bound to a location, these abilities are kind of nice because the players can't truck it around with them. They can go perform this dedication ceremony. They can also do funeral rites or weddings here, by the way. And it normally takes 25 gold pieces worth of powdered silver, which is control for player-led stuff, but here is as a bonus to the location. I'm just allowing it to happen for free. So this creates for me this idea of, hey, Favorite Dream Studios, it's great to have you here. This created for me this area that would cause people in the region to seek it out, to come there if they want to have a wedding on the site, if they want to bury somebody or give them consecrated on a funeral rite, if they want to pray as like a pilgrimage. There's a reason, but since it's locked to a geographic location, they really, that benefit can't follow them throughout the rest of the world. This dedication is nice, but it's not super nice. It's a D4 to any one saving throw once in a 24-hour period. So if they dedicate it and they move on, they get that one roll. It's kind of cool, but if it takes more than 24 hours, it passes. Same thing with sort of coming of age or atonement is a one-time ability, or blessed water is probably the biggest ability here. I might think about curbing that, but the core here is to create a system that the players can interact with locations that make them more mystical, that give them something to role play about, give them some choices, that let them interact with these locations and do some role playing. And this is not a spoiler, so don't worry, players, but it's something you probably realize from now. But for people who are not my players, one of the things I've had them run into repeatedly as they move through these magical locations are something called chingwas. I think it's chwingas. Yeah, chwinga. So I'll pull those up. So these are these little nature spirits that I sort of love, that the players have. It's a really small image, isn't it? Like this image is great. This is, I think, from an anime, actually. But I've had these small spirits that they encounter that play out these pantomimed of whatever events have happened around them, and the players have so far gone along with them each time. They've the nature of these creatures, they're neutral. They see what's going on out there. And they pantomime it. They take on the nature of whatever's around them, and so they're spirits of the natural world that just tell you how you're fitting in, as sort of indicator of health. Now, it wasn't really much of a challenge because I knew the players were going to do this, but I put them out there, and if you play along with them, the players have already figured this out, which is why it's not a spoiler. If you play along, they always come out, they pantomime some scenario, they lead through something, and if you play with them, if you interact with them, if you honor the spirit of the sort of the pantomime that they're doing, they will bless you with some sort of nature's blessing. Now that's happened to several times. I think a couple of sessions ago, I had this great opportunity where this player, I don't do it as much as I intend to, but I do this Tales by the Campfire methodology for DMs, which I recommend, which is you choose a player and when they camp at night, or they have some lull moment that's right for role playing out in the wilderness, but there's no NPCs to interact with, and maybe you want to encourage them to interact with each other. You do Tales by the Campfire. So you ask the player, the character, to tell a story of either loss, love, or heroism. And sometimes people roll a dice for it, or they draw a card for it, or something like that. And I had drawn one of the players and randomly drawn loss again. And I think I went with like just give me a loss, or I either gave him the inspiration of the first death they encountered. So they're in the middle of this woods. They unpack this story about losing their first dog. And it was a great little role-playing moment. And I had already rolled a random encounter to have these chingwas showed up. So I just decided they were right at the site of, the player came up with it on the spot, that they were camping in the site where they buried their first dog. So this first dog's grave is there. And I went through this whole thing of them running across the chingwas, eating a meal, and the player character immediately played along with the chingwas there. So they blessed them by having the spirit of the dog return to the character that night and say hello to them. That Rainbow Bridge thing. I'm a pet lover, and a lot of people are, which of course gave me all the feels as a game master. But it was a nice moment in game. And when the players woke up the next morning, I think I gave them like a D6 temporary hit points to go for a 24-hour period. So it was a great little vignette, a great little moment. And now that's playing out here. Now, it gives them some protection because if bad guys come in and acting in bad faith in this location that they're now making to their home, what they don't know is that Chinguas will mess with them. It will give them a disadvantage on concentration saves. It could give them a equivalent of a Bane where they lose a D4. These kinds of things are to the player's advantage, but as a DM, it's always a big joy when I'm pushing mechanics on something, but the players are not engaging with it because of the mechanics. They're engaging with it because of the narrative. I'd be less reluctant as a game master, and you would have to make a decision too in your game. How much do I want to get into the mechanics? Am I just creating yet another sort of transactional relationship between the players in the system, or am I getting what I want out of it? If you follow me on Twitter, if you follow me in all the social media, I say all the time, decide what you want out of something, and then design it to give you that thing. So I'm trying to design this to give them a handle on the world, something to interact with. I would not have been getting out of it sort of as transactional thing if they knew, okay, let me check my box for my prayers that morning. That would probably not be attractive. Although as a game master, if the player likes it, I'd let them do it. It just doesn't jazz me as a game master is all. It's not what I want out of it. But that's fine. I don't always have to get what I personally want out of things. Back to my spicy Heck Boy mug today. I can't see if I'm doing my spicy Heck Boy. And my NPC Energy t-shirt, by the way. Love this thing. She's not on here, but if you follow Hope for TTRPGs, she does a lot of RPG solidarity stuff. She has a t-shirt. I actually bought this through her store, so I recommend it. Also, I see Fever Dream Studios is on the stream today. Hi. Hey, how are you? It's great to have you here, by the way. He runs a great Twitch channel. He's also a great Twitter follower, so I definitely recommend Fever Dream Studios as a follower there. They do some great streaming, great design. All right, so back here. So enchanted locations. What I'm trying to do is create a broader sense of what this could be in the world to give some sense of wonder, to give some options. And I want to talk about how I design that. I will probably blog about this in the future, but I think the first thing when I design something is I take stock of things. I take stock of, well, what happens in the game? What are people used to get them thinking along the lines of what they might, what tools do they have to create something? So I'm going to actually do a search here for a previous article. See if I can find it. Bonus. What is it? I think it's bonus, maybe. My site's so slow. I should upgrade I could upgrade the thing behind it. No, simmering sadness. There, tools for affecting roles in D&D. This is one of the things that I'll put out there. So I did an analysis, just statistical analysis is a generous term. I tried to rank what are the different things that can affect roles and combat roles in the game? What are the different kinds of things? And this can be used for a location too. So it goes all the way from disadvantage being the most powerful negative effect up through Bane is sort of the next highest. Then you get to luck ability rerolling ones. Then you get to the guidance and bless ability plus 1d4. Then bardic inspiration and then advantage. And then you get the higher level bardic inspirations. So when you're looking at an enchanted location, you can do things like you want impart some sort of condition either on the people entering it in good faith or the people not acting in good faith. So cursed actions. You can you do things like give conditions, maybe confusion, maybe they get bound, maybe they can't wake from sleep, maybe they're frightened, maybe there's lots of things you can do and create some lore around it. Usually, so in the case of the gorge I just threw out, that is that's a holy location that's attuned to the planes of the gods. You could instead have a Fey location where the Fey spirits come through. They have some motivation. It could be some magical accident that happened. Some wizard died on that spot or lived there forever, so it's infused with eldritch magic energy. You could have a dragon died there with something similar. You could have just a spirit of nature coming forward in there, so it does all kinds of things. But you can decide on, give yourself, I'm always a fan of 3 as a D&D. Give yourself 3 things that things can escalate through. Use this as a guide and then begin to look through spells in the book to find out what else is out there. So I often do things like if I have a nature spell, I'll usually just hit the spells resources. So let's do that. View spells. So, oh no, I have. How do I ban somebody? I've got a bot. Ban, ban, am ganja 2401. Ban. Yep. Sorry about that, everybody. So what I usually do is I hit the spells up first. So in this case, this is a holy site, right? So I'm going to cleric, and I'm going to filter by spells and find out things that give me effects that I might want to do something, and just get like a magic item, give it once per day. So in here, I just went with a first level spell, ceremony. Really great. It can be cast as a ritual anyway. It's something that players don't often take, don't often memorize, because they don't usually do those things unless it's a role-playing challenge. So that, to me, makes it a great fit. But obviously, there's things like Bless or Bane. Command is probably not a great fit, right? Because you don't want to remove agency. You want to provide a location that gives some enriching ability or hampering ability to enemies that and use it as a guide to work things through. Like healing word, probably too much. They can do things like get advantage on their healing locations, on a location if they heal there, let's say. You can step out of spells and begin to start working at mechanics. Healing is a great mechanic. Hit die recovery is a great mechanic. Exhaustion recovery is a great mechanic. Maybe they get bonuses to crafting. Those are different things that you can do. Looking back at this, tools for affecting changes. Maybe you could give them advantage on any roll related to a crafting check within that area. There's lots and lots and lots of things you can do. I used to, in my third edition campaign world, I go and write my own campaign world every once in a while, just like everybody else. I used to have this feature where all churches had a relic at the center of it. That's what made you sort of blessed by the church hierarchy. They would give you a relic that let you summon a celestial hound to serve you once per day, which made churches very, very powerful locations. But they're bound to a physical location. So, and the implication was if players went and desecrated a temple, there'd be something that didn't have to be a hound archon. It could be something to an evil god. There were some stakes that they were immediately aware of that was tied to the lore of the world that gave them the context. If they were going to a holy location with one of these artifacts, they were in for quite a bit of trouble. Fever Dream Studio says, this reminds me of a location I have in my homebrew world, a location in the forest where a powerful sorcerer lost a loved one. She then died there in grief, and her spirit haunts the forest, causing magical hazards, necrotic tornadoes. Yeah, that's great. I love things like this. I think this is a nice compromise between item enchantments and when they came out in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, the magical regions, right? So these are like smaller versions of magical region. Now, I think magical regions are too powerful. It's a random table. It's more like wild magic, which is a little weird. I personally like that rule of 3. Choose an escalating rule of 3. So the first one would be ceremony. Like I said here, maybe you give a +1 to something. In the case of this session, I'm just doing this consecrated to Odin. It's consecrated to a god. Specifically, let me talk to what I made here. So the worshiper must make a DC 10 religion check to perform the proper rites. So in other words, they have to go and honor the god properly. I run gods transactionally in my world. I think one of the weird things for me in D&D, people run religion as an analog to modern religion, which tend to be evangelical and conversion based and faith based, right? But ancient religions really viewed gods as sometimes indifferent, always transactional. You would petition a god. You wouldn't worship the god. You petition it with something that honored it to buy you safe passage or a blessing on your house or something like that. So I view gods in games similar that way. They're okay. They're not there for worshipers. They're there for honor, to be honored. And so anyway, you do that to perform the proper rite, and you can have somebody else make the check for you. So if the players decided at some point they wanted to bring in a priest of Odin, it would have to be a priest of Odin, though. They can do that rite for them, and then you get into the politics of would this priest do that for them? And I think it's an interesting thing. And if they do it, they get this ceremony spell, and they can choose any one of these atonement, coming of age, dedication, funeral rite, or wedding. Now that's the first ability. I'm not going to reveal what other abilities might be out there, but I like to have this escalation of properties that this location can have depending on the intensity of the energy. In this case, I'm having the players invest in the region as a headquarters and a stronghold. So they might choose to spend more gold to build a tower or a proper temple, or not do that at all, just leave it the way it is. There's some interest in a library, but that might be counter to, if it's a magical library, it's not a library to Odin. So they have to have something that brings it into the thematic nature, and then they can maybe increase it so they get more of an area wide, or maybe a protection spell from someone that might be their enemies. They might even get creatures or beings that would visit to work with them if they got it from Odin's pantheon or Odin's servants to make it more enriched for them. Likewise, if you create an encounter area in your game, give it those 3 elements, right? Give it the at its base level, it provides some base level effect, maybe a bane effect, maybe it's disadvantage for certain type of roles. Perhaps nature doesn't want you there, like if you don't. There's a secret that's hidden that if you don't honor the Fae in a glade, you have disadvantage on any survival check into the area. I had done this earlier with it before the players had undone the dedication to Aureel. They couldn't sleep. They had to make a survival check just to sleep and get a long rest. So these are small effects you can bring into the region. The other is, actually they already discovered this. So the 3 that the previous region had when it was dedicated to Aureel is one, somebody you could worship Aureel and get that plus 1d4 to a save once per day. So the players wouldn't know that since they don't worship Aureel. 2 is that if you're a worshiper of Aureel, you recover all of your hit dice every long rest. That's not what players not the worshipers, so they didn't get that. They got the opposite, which was they couldn't take a long rest unless they succeeded on a survival check. And the third one is that they would have these cold light walkers would rise if someone tried to desecrate or damage the holy site, that they would come and attack whoever tried to do that. And that's what the capstone for that session, this is just the last session we did, was the players figured out that the area was dedicated. They figured out that they can go back, rededicate it to somebody else. And when they broke the dedication to Aureel, these cold like workers came up and attacked them in the middle of the night. So that was how that encounter got rolled out. So now they're in the process of making it their own magical location. So yeah, that's what's going on there. I'll probably write more formal rules. Something I would suggest to you if you haven't used them, Matt Colville, who a lot of people know. Matt Colville is my spirit animal. He's my spirit guide. He wrote a book called Strongholds and Followers. I'll be honest, I find that book a little dry. Like I don't actually see it as super valuable, but it is a nice little guide to. By the way, why don't I find it super valuable? I was hoping for more specific abilities and rules. Like I know I can do things like have them train infantry there, or create a few magical abilities. There are a few area effects that players can use, but that's not what I'm shooting for. Like in Matt's version of it, you can basically create the location as a magic item that you can directly use. You can do things like beguile enemies or affect armies. So it's just a sort of Sauron and Mordor kind of effect. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking to create instead a nature for the area, to an enchanted area, and the players learning how to interact with that nature rather than the players using it like an extended magic item. So maybe this is worth a blog post I'll write in the future, but I think that rule of 3, escalating set of abilities, what triggers them, that's the way to enact things. I don't do it in this game, but when I get into really lore-heavy games with players that are interested in lore, my go-tos are households. That hearth and home is a big folk magic type of element, so that tradition that you see from a lot of stories about sharing bread with people that come there, that creates a spell. That's a small folk magic type of spell where if you break bread and share salt with somebody when they come to your house, now you're both bound that if one of you breaks guest right, in other words, attacks somebody without provocation, steals something or something like that, you suffer bane for the next 24 hours or something like that, or may have to make a saving throw. That's a really good go-to one, because I love this idea of places of power, that players are as hobos, right? As travel hobos, hopefully not murder hobos, that players are out in the world untethered, and that there's a strong benefit to being tethered to a place. Yeah. Kyle saying he wanted the Blade to see how cool the necrotic tornadoes are. Yeah, I think that's great. Fever Dream Studios, if you haven't checked it out, I would definitely recommend the what do they call it? Magical Regions in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. That would be a great ability. In my Rime of the Frost Maiden campaign, I ran that kind of strongly. Not strongly, a couple cases where frost would just flash freeze everything, and just frost would climb over stuff, light flames would go out. The first time I ran it for the players, I was surprised at how much they freaked out by it. It was really cool. It was enhanced by a devil, a prince of hell, so it made it even worse, but it's still in effect. So that those kinds of like environmental effects that come out of nowhere, I think are hugely interesting. Glaucon. Kyle, I don't know how to say your online name, so I apologize if I'm saying it wrong. But yeah, I want to belated to say how cool necrotic tornadoes are. Also, places of power I automatically hear in Geralt's voice from Witcher 3. Yeah, that's it's not really Geralt. That's an old folklore thing, right? Enchanted places. But Witcher 3 leaned heavily into folklore. So I'm looking to leverage that back in my game. Something I thought was really interesting. I had a conversation on Twitter with Brad Stoddard. He's an author for Tribal Lily. And I think one of the, by the way, how's my volume? If you're noticing, it's on the last couple of streams, it was a little low. I'm worried it's over modulating or maybe getting a little high. But if it's good or bad, let me know. Anyway, with Brad, we were talking about settings. So I miss what am I getting at with this? Sorry, you hear a leaf blower in the background. It's my neighbor. What am I getting at with this magical location, this enchanted location? Why am I doing it? I think that one of the interesting things is that not interesting. One of the disappointing things for me in both 4th edition and 5th is that we really lost the idea of an opinionated setting, a setting that has deep lore that actually affects the game in some meaningful way. We really in 4th edition and 5th edition, we get these like really thin books, Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide or Eberron Rising from the Last War. They're cool. You know, they're okay, but they don't really give you a deep lore. Most of the setting is embedded in the system. Now, there's always been this idea of an applied system or applied setting in any RPG system, but it's so heavily layered in the 5th edition rules that people have lost sight that settings used to have these super strong flavor that changed parts of the system or sent things in a different direction entirely. So Spelljammer or Dark Sun or Eberron. The Forgotten Realms used to have very extensively defined prestige classes. These are all sort of deep lore that really affected the game in fun ways, and we sort of lost that. If it's not in the core books, it's not in the game. So it's not in the setting. And this is all my attempt to bring some of that just cool stuff back. Matt Colville had a great stream on magic items a while back about, it's one of his running a game series where he talked about something similar, that now all abilities are loaded into class abilities, and back in early versions of the game that a lot of abilities were tied to some dope magic item that you would get. And that was really, the magic items were these extensions of your character. They give you extra abilities. I try to do that. Most of the players in my game have an item that I specifically designed for them based on what I hear them say. Sometimes I miss the mark on that. One of the people in the stream today, you've got one coming up. I know I've teased that, but there's one that you'll have to do some work to get if you want. You always have to do the work to get it. But there's something with that player and whatever interest they've expressed in mind. So we'll see how that goes. All right. We're halfway through. I'm going to get to encounters and terrain. So I hate to say it. If you're in my game, we're going to start with spoilers here soon. So probably good to leave. Shoo. I'm going to actually talk about our next session and how to include environments and terrain and encounters, and hopefully a fun way. So Shu, Okay, I'll give you 3, 2, 1. Okay. All right. Take care, Kyle. All right. So in my upcoming session, I have a bog that the players are going to probably run through, assuming they don't turn around and go home. Now, what I want to do is I want to make this a much more. So I have this vision of bogmen. If you know bogmen from Wikipedia or any of the online in Europe around peak bogs and other places, for some reason, some cultures had the tradition of killing people and dumping them in a bog, and we find them 1,000 years later. Take care, everyone. The By the way, I should mention I am giving away. I'm doing a giveaway today, so I'll name the person. You have to, if you saw the tweet, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Twitch, and say hello here. So there's only a couple people, but you're entered if you've done all those things. I will hit you up on Twitter with a link for a paper dungeon Steam key if you want it. So anyway, you have to say hi here too. So if you're here and lurking, at least drop a hi. I have these keys I don't know what to do with, so that's what I'm doing. All right, so back on this on the Bog Warriors. So I want the players are what they're going to do is go to the realm of Isgard, which is like an analog for Asgard. They're going to come across a farmstead that's going to give them. So the MacGuffin here is that I'm tipping the hand of what's going on in Icewind Dale, my version of Icewind Dale. This is entirely my creation, by the way. So Auril has locked the area in this endless winter. The plot here is I'm saying that she went to Isgard through this portal that the players now control. This magical place that I've been talking about for the last half hour. One of the things is it has this big labyrinth that if you walk the right path on, you port yourself over to Isgard. And there, what she did she grabbed the power to lock the region in this eternal winter by killing a Norn and taking her voice. This Norn in Isgard would sing at the change of the seasons. So she would sing in spring, she would sing in summer, she would sing in winter. So Auril went, killed her, took her voice, and tore her soul apart so she can't come back to life because she's an immortal. And has been using her voice to lock Icewind Dale in this eternal winter and create her own pocket dimension. So the players are going to go there. Now we're at the reveal to figure out what the last third of my campaign is going to be. The players are going to go there. They would need to get this story about Auril having come, killed this Norn, grabbed her voice and torn her apart, and realize that if they let the Norn be reborn, she will collect her voice back and Auril will lose his power. So they have to go there. They'll do some interaction at a farmstead. They're going to encounter Loki, but they don't know it's going to be Loki. Loki has a name called Bosdogan. Bosdogan. There we go. So Boz is going to try to lead them astray. But one of the things they have to do, they go to this farmstead, do some role playing, get the story of what happened, realize what the magical MacGuffin they have to do to restore this Norn will be. So they have to go through this bog to this tree that she appears as a starling and sings every day. So she hatches from an egg when she does this. So they have to recover the egg that she can't be born from because her spirit is torn apart. Take the egg back to Icewind Dale, recover the pieces of the divided spirit. First, they'll go get her heart, which is kept in a berserker cave in this flame. Then they'll go get her mind, which is kept in this Netherese spire. And then they get her voice back from Auril. They kill Auril, take her voice back, and that lets the Norn be reborn. So to get to that egg, they have to go through this bog. And now the party's at 5th level. I need to try to jazz adventures up, but I'm stuck with how to do it because they're cutting through everything in front of them. They're mostly melee characters. They've accessed that 2 melee attacks per round. So they're really, really, really cutting into things. So I want to use this bog and these whites to attack them. So I think 4 actually might be a little bit too small because whites are here. They are CR3 creatures. 4. This is where the challenge rating stuff in D&D starts to fall apart for me. It's a DC. They're challenge rating 3. 4 of them against a party of 5 4 5th level characters is a deadly encounter. I don't think it is. I don't think it is at all, especially since they have 45 hit points. The truth is, especially with Smite, my Paladin can probably burn through one of them in a round. So yeah, I'm not sure I really want to do that, but so I might bump this up a little bit. I'm not a big fan of this drain life ability, by the way, yeah. So anyway, I might go ahead and I might modify the actual encounter. But what I want to do, whatever I do in there, what I want to do is make the terrain more difficult to use. So I'm going to use the quicksand rules. So I'll have to figure that out, how to do that properly in game. But if you look over in the quicksand rules for D&D Beyond, here we go. Come on, buddy. All right. So over here, quicksand. The pick in these rules, it covers a 10-foot square area, but I'm going to say anything basically off a small, thin path that runs through the bog is considered quicksand. That players will have to make a DC 10 dexterity check anytime they're walking through it or fall into bog territory, right? Mud, which the creature may sinks 1d4 plus 1 feet into the quicksand. Now, this is interesting because one of the characters is a gnome. So the gnome might, in one round, fall completely into the mud and submerge. And which, well, anyway, when they're in there, they're restrained. So attacks have advantage against them, and they have, attack rolls on the creature have advantage, and the creature's attack rolls have disadvantage. That might make me keep these four whites, by the way. And then the creature has disadvantage on further dex checks to not get stuck. At this time, the creature turns, at the start of each creature's turns, it sinks 1d4 feet more into the quicksand. As long as the creature is not completely submerged, it can escape by using its action to succeed on a strength check, which is important because it's not dex. If it was dex, they'd be at a disadvantage. And the DC is 10 plus a number of feet the creature is sunk into the quicksand. So this is deadly. I like this because it's going to add a lot of features if the players want to do anything but ranged attacks from the trail. They're going to have to face this quicksand, and I'm going to give them a save every turn. So it's a DC 10 dex save, which isn't that high, or they fall into the quicksand. Now the reason I'm doing that is that you have to think when you design an encounter, what's my worst case scenario here? My worst case scenario is everybody fails. They all sink into the mud and they all drown, right? Because once you're underneath, once you're submerged, you can't make a DC strength check to get yourself out anymore. So first thing I'm going to do is modify that. This is always as DM, give yourself some sort of out. Give yourself some sort of back out, which is so players. Rules mods to quicksand. So anytime a player steps off the path, the thin path, they it doesn't even to be step off or falls off, goes off the path, the thin path. They have to make a DC 10 dex save, should be dex save, or get stuck in quicksand. Bog mud, I'll call it, bog mud. Use quicksand rules for bog mud with following exceptions. So one of the things, by the way, is that this Loki character that they'll meet earlier, there'll be a role-playing challenge where the players might be able to free that character. Now, he's going to be stuck in a gibbet and trying to con them into saving him. I don't know if they'll go for it or not. If they do, he's going to lead them astray in the bog and get them stuck in the middle of nowhere. So there's going to be no path for them to follow. If they make nice with the people at the farmstead, they'll tell them about the path to get through. So that's a role-playing challenge that the players have to do. So I'm setting it up that they might be walking through the bog no matter what, and I'll just have this happen if there is a fight. So I'm rules mod to quicksand. Anytime a player goes off the thin path, they have to make a DC 10 dex save or get stuck in bog mud. Mud follows the rules for quicksand. Rules for quicksand. except a player submerged can still make a strength check to save themselves when submerged, but at disadvantage. So you always want to calculate when you're designing an encounter what's the worst that can happen. If you followed these streams for a while, you might remember. Welcome back, Fever Dream Studios. If you followed these streams for a while, you might remember I was designing way back a encounter with a frost giant skeleton, which was poorly designed because it was targeted. It was like a CR6 creature targeting CR3 player character or level 3 player characters. And looking at its attack, it's possible on a crit, if it rolls well, it could kill a player outright with massive damage on a single strike. That to me is a no-no. When you look at something like what's the worst it can go? In other words, can they trap a player where they have no agency and makes it so they can't save themselves? It's no fun for anybody. Unless you create a situation where they could have avoided it. The gameplay is actually avoiding that scenario. That's legitimate. But generally speaking, I just think it's a bad form to create something that just, one bad roll and you're gone. I don't like save or die. So what's the tension, right? What's the tension of a save or die? So I'm a little worried about this because the players can't avoid this. I'm giving them something back by letting them make a strength check to get out, even if they're submerged. But how long would it take to get submerged? So at a D4 plus 1 feet per round, and a D4 every subsequent round. I have one player, the gnome, could be completely submerged one round. I'm actually okay with that. I'm okay with that because I just, them's the breaks, buddy. I have another character who is who's like almost 7 feet tall. Even then, the max I can roll in 2 rounds is 9. So all of the party could theoretically be trapped under the mud at 9 hit points. Yeah, I think that would be rough. But I'm okay with it. So I'm debating now, and if you have a thought on this, so I'll tell you what I'm internally debating. Like make my internal monologue, external dialogue here. That's why I'm streaming. What I'm debating is do I cut down the feet? How fast they're sinking, right? Do I cut it down to half a D4? Do I cut it down to a D3? It might be, because why do I care as a DM? What do I want? Follow my own DM advice. What do I want out of this? What I want out of this is I want to give the players a little bit of interaction with the terrain. I'm a little nervous because rules like this sometimes can seem okay to the DM, but when you're the player having to deal with being restrained, not so much fun, right? So I'm a little hesitant, but I think it's fair because it's evocative. It's evocative of these bogs that might be in Ysgard or Asgard, which are full of malevolent creatures, right? I think so. I'm okay with that. But do I need them I don't need them to sink that fast. What I really need is a restrained condition. I need to make the fight a little harder for them. I need them to show off and start to think about tactically how to operate at range. Which they can easily do, by the way. Everybody except the Paladin, who, well, she's got a lot of abilities already, but the Paladin doesn't really have ranged attacks. Everybody else is like an archer. I just gave the Barbarian this hammer they can throw, kind of like Thor's hammer. But it's an interesting ability because if they miss their attack, if they hit with the hammer on a thrown attack, it returns in their hand. If they miss, it falls to the ground and doesn't return. So that'll give them something to debate. But they have javelins. I'm not sure that the Paladin has anything ranged. And of course the Mage has ranged stuff, but he could be underwater in a single roll. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce this to 1d3 feet per round. So reduce sinking to 1d3 feet around. And what else can I do? That's it. Yes, that's enough. So they're 1 foot trapped. It's fairly easy to get out, but they're going to be stuck in this mud. And if Loki has tricked them to going out in the middle and there's no path to get to, they're going to constantly have to deal with this danger. I actually think that's enough for what I want to do there. So that's what I'm going to do. So they end up in this fight with the whites. Oh, by the way, the whites are immune to this because the bogmen. I'm not going to call them whites. By bogmen for bogmen. Ooh, I think I had a better idea. Bogmen, parentheses, whites. I wonder if I can come up with some lore reason. I already did that. With some lore reason that makes these whites come forward. So that might even be better than just saying there's 4 of them. Give some environmental effect that causes them to rise, right? That the players can either clumsily interact with or figure out, right? Like it's a puzzle that they can figure out how to get around. So I have to think of what that is, though. It would be great if they had some ability. So let me finish this. The bogmen stay at range. Maybe they've got longbows, but maybe I should give them slings instead. Same damage. So I'm reskinning it, by the way. I'm not actually making arrows. I'm going to say it's a sling, but I'll use the exact same rolls. Bogmen stay at range. They do slings instead. That will force the players to decide either if they're on the trail to engage them in range combat. Is there some way to make more appear? I need some kind of like Eastern European or Slavic or Nordic or some kind of legend that makes what would offend creatures in a bog. I don't know. It'd be good to hit them with 4 to begin with. But if they don't do something, more begin to appear, right? So this way I can up the challenge of the encounter. Like if I'm doing all this work to make this encounter challenging, but the players might burn through it in a single round and it ended up being nothing. Because I've got really nothing for them at the solstice, the solstice tree where they go to get the egg back. What I want out of the solstice tree encounter is them to get the egg, talk to a phase spirit there, ask it, keep the egg. It tells them keep the egg alive. This is her spirit. If you want to bring her back, you have to make sure the egg doesn't get smashed. So I'm not really going to smash the egg, but give them some thinking to work around that. So I don't want it to go. I want that to be a role playing encounter. I run a 2.5 hour game, 3 hour game, so I really only have time for 2 big fights, and there's going to be one before this at the farmstead potentially, because the MacGuffin is a staff that the player can get that's out in the middle of this cow's field. I'm using the stats from a Gorgon, but the player characters can fight this thing to get the staff if they want. And what they don't know, this is also a MacGuffin, a magical area, it's Isgard. They can't sleep here. They're mortals. They haven't died. Only the dead can sleep here. Living cannot sleep in Isgard. So they can't long rest. That's one. They won't discover that until later. Some way to make it more appealing. So I could have something that triggers it, let them figure out what that is. So here's what I'll do. I'll lean into that enchanted region. I'll say tease. I like this idea of like leaving sweet cakes or something that's very Nordic, like very Hansel and Gretel like. You have to go. There'll be all right. So there'll be shrines to each one of the men lost in the bog. These will be people who have gone in to quest. Shrines appear at locations throughout the bog. People must leave offerings of sweet cakes or other home goods, or more bogmen will appear. It basically is disrespecting them. So the first time I trigger it, the players won't know. These bogmen will show up, or Loki will appear, and something will happen. And After that, they realize that they need to go back and leave a sweet cake or something at the shrine they just passed. Um, yeah, I like that. So that creates a situation where I even like that better. That creates this like less sinking effect. I like it because they'll have to go out into the bog. It won't be on the path, so they'll have to endure this sinking effect or come up with some spell. They have options to do that. They'll just have to get smart about it. I mean, that's all a game is, right? Like you design a encounter to be beat. You leave it to players to figure out how to do it. And then so there'd be the shrine that they approach. Let's see if I can find an image for a bog shrine. Nordic bog shrine, I should call it. Nordic bog shrine. Look at this stuff. Ooh, that could be cool. Look at that. A little gazebo-ish looking thing. Yeah, that could be cool. I'll have to save it and look for these later. It's vaguely Asian, vaguely Nordic, which is what I specifically like about it because I hate direct cultural analogs. But yeah, something like this would be really great. In Nederland, yeah, so it's Germanic, but look at that. That's cool too. Anyway, yeah, so I'll use something like that where they leave sweet cakes or offerings. I'll have to figure out some clue I can drop at the farmstead that they should be doing that, or maybe they just see old. Ooh, I know what I'll do. All right, so I always have these ideas halfway through. So what I want to tease it. I'll put something up here. Secrets. You must up at the farmstead. You must leave an offering of sweet cakes in the bog at shrines to avoid wrath of the bogmen. Wrath of the bogmen. And we're wrapping this up. Bigmen? Bogmen. The farmsteaders, who are gods, by the way. The players won't know that. It'll be very, very, very earthy kind of encounter. We'll give them sweet cakes for the road. And just leave it at that. Just say, sweet cakes for the road. This is for your travels. We'll give them something like that. If they endear themselves to them. In other words, if they show them proper respect, it's always if you look back at legends like the Odyssey or the Iliad and the Odyssey, most of that story is built around: have you observed guest right properly? Have you all the superstitions around home and hearth, and have they honored, i.e., have they honored their home? But if they do what players sometimes do, which they do the James Kirk thing, right? They're always pledged not to interfere, but they come in and say, all your traditions are wrong, and you're wrong for doing this. If they give them grief, I'm not going to get it. And I can decide how many bogmen want to come. I'm not going to throw 100 at them. But and if they go with Loki, Loki's not going to give him jack squat. Matter of fact, Loki are creating bogmen. Ooh, that's another secret. Loki. Boz is creating bogmen by tricking them to go out into the bog. Yeah, he doesn't want this. He worked with Oriel. He's in the cage. Well, it's the whole thing up there. You don't see the write-up, but he's in the cage for actually helping out Oriel when she came through, because he thought it was funny. All right. So yeah, I think that's great. So I might even cut this down. It might be like a D2. That's another thing you can do. So by the way, I'll wrap up with this. When I'm thinking about this mechanic, I'll decide it during the week. What I want is to sync a little bit. I want it to be progressive, but I don't want it to be all or nothing. Like 1 or 2 rounds are gone. But there's a couple ways you can do it, right? If you want one of the downsides of people thinking when it comes to D&D is they're obsessed with a single die roll. That's not really great because a single die roll can be very, very very volatile. So like a D20, for instance, a 1 and a 20 are just as likely as a 15 or an 18. It can be all over the map. There's no bell curve to it. So if what I want is I can take two possibilities here. Have a small dice roll so I know it's incremental over time. I think I'm going to keep it at D3. The other way I could have done it is just do like pass fail. Do roll 4d6. If it's above a 4, everyone that's above a 4 is 1 feet. You're more likely to get a center number in that and have a bell curve to it. But I don't think I need that. I think that 1d3 is probably enough because it's going to take several rolls for them to fail to get buried. Although theoretically, I could do 3 rounds. I could do 9 feet. So 2 rounds, I think 3 of my 4 players, if I max out 2 rounds in a row, 3 of my 4 players are underwater, and I have a third one who could fail in the next round. But I mean, they're still able to get out, so I'm not that worried about it. Yeah, I think that's a fine ability. I'm going to replace the white's ability, by the way. And I don't have time to design it today because I'm going to wrap up here in just 1 minute. But this life drain ability, instead, I'm going to have the white go up to them and throw the noose, because these bogmen have nooses around their neck. Throw the noose around them and begin to pull off and choke them, and that's how they do their drain life ability. Or they'll twist their hand and one will appear around their neck and begin to choke them. That would be awesome, and it reduces their maximum hit points. And since they can't rest here, long rest, that'll be good. Anyway, I think that's a good. That's what I'm doing. That's how I'm going to do encompass terrain, get terrain in. Now, when you're looking for terrain ideas, look in the DMG. There's all kinds of things: frigid water, desecrated ground, razor vine, which you can replace for just heavy thorns, slippery ice. Quicksand can become mud. Slippery ice could become mud. It could just be like a sheer rocky cliff. You could have avalanches. Something, I don't think there's anything in here for avalanche, but so instead of snow, it could be rock slides. It could be, there's lots of things that you can do to create interesting effects that give the players a reason to balance their danger and risk when they're in an encounter. And I recommend you do that. All right. I am going to go ahead and wrap this up here today. I stream live every week on Twitch, on YouTube, simultaneously. I hope you'll follow it. Listen, I'm a small streamer. I'm not looking to become a big deal, which is good because I don't have the content to do it. But it would really, really help this channel if you will follow me on Twitter, if you'll follow me on Twitch and YouTube, if you'll go ahead and share these videos or these tips, anything, tag me in Twitter if you think you found something interesting. That would be super, super great for me. Really help this channel out and help me build the community that I'm looking to build. All right. So I am going to roll 1d4. I've got make sure I've got nobody else. So I've had 2 people say hello. So I'm going to go 50-50 here. Flip a coin. Heads is Glaucon and tails is Fever Dream Studios. Flipping. Tails. Oh, Tails, Fever Dream Studio, right? Fever Dream Studio, congratulations. You have won the giveaway for Paper Dungeons. It's a really cute little game. I'll hit you up on Twitter later today. I have to go grab lunch with my wife, but I'll hit you up on Twitter. I'll send you the Steam key for that. I hope you enjoy the game. Give it to somebody else if you don't like the game, or if you don't want it. But it's I hope you really have fun for it. I appreciate it. Thank you everybody for joining me today. Give me a follow, likes, all the social media things. I hope you join me next week as I discuss more D&D, and I hope you engage me in conversation on Twitter and other places like that. So in the meantime, remember, fun is not optional. Thanks, everybody. You take care.
I feel